of welcoming Dr. Professor Emeritus Guy McPherson from Arizona University. He's going to talk to us about abrupt climate change and living a life of excellence. Thank you, Guy.
Thank you, everybody, for making an appearance today. I'm getting direction from the director. It says I'm in the light now. How about now? Because now the camera can see me better. I'm a narcissist. So I love the camera being able to see. There's actually a couple of cameras, and apparently the camera puts on 10 pounds. So I have 2 cameras on me, just so you know I don't usually look this fat. I'd like to start, well, I think Mike gave away the whole show. So I really have nothing else to say. We can just go to questions now. Sometimes I start by having this asteroid on the screen, and it reminds me to point out that if you're the kind of person, we know there's an asteroid coming, we know when it's going to hit the planet, and therefore obliterate habitat for our species. If you're the kind of person who doesn't want to know, now might be a good time to leave. But Mike already said the key words, near-term human extinction, so you already know the asteroid is here. We've met the asteroid, as Pogo said, and it is us. In 2013, the IPCC's vaunted 5th assessment was leaked. It was officially released in 2014. But starting in September 2013, they pointed out that global warming is irreversible without massive geoengineering of the atmosphere's chemistry. So this is one of the most conservative bodies on the planet. They rely upon information that is 7 to 10 years old by the time it reaches the public ears. In the 5th assessment, methane was mentioned twice in a single table in the hundreds of pages comprising the 5th assessment. So if the IPCC reached this conclusion, the situation is very, very dire. There have been at least 5 reference journal articles that have come out since that statement was made, pointing out that geoengineering is a horrible idea and it's probably going to make things worse, not better. That's why Truth Out headlined their report from April of last year, Intergovernmental Climate Report, leaves hopes hanging on fantasy technology. Geoengineering is fantasy technology. And 2 days later, the NASA chief reports that humanity's future depends on a mission to Mars, indicating that we need to get there by 2030 because there won't be sufficient habitat on this particular planet. Elon Musk of Tesla fame says that's not fast enough, we have to get there by 2024. We're running out of habitat here. How quickly could we run out of habitat? Oh, first my little version of the whole story. So now we can take questions. Well, we've had no humans on this planet at 3.3 degrees or higher above the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. So starting in 1750, we're currently at 0.85 degrees above the level we were at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, 1750. And we've never had humans at above 3.3 or higher. 3.3 or higher. The highest temperature we've seen humans on the planet was during the Eemian, when temperatures rose to about 3.22 degrees above baseline in a period of thousands of years. What we're looking at now is an acceleration of that temperature rise. So in fact, we're headed above 3.5 degrees above baseline in the very near future. I'm suggesting that human extinction will result not from our inability to be clever. We're especially clever. In fact, we misnamed ourselves. Homo sapiens, the wise apes? I don't think so. Homo calidus, the clever ape? Maybe so. I think we're a lot more clever than wise. The problem here is one of habitat. We rely upon the living planet for our own survival. We rely upon the ability of the planet to provide plants. Without plants, we're all dead. Never mind breathing and the source of oxygen. But plants as the ultimate source of food is going to be problematic if plants can't keep up. Already at the relatively slow linear rate of change we're observing now, plants, evolution by natural selection lags behind climate change by a factor of 10,000. according to an August 2013 paper in Ecology Letters, by a factor of 10,000. What I'm going to talk about is accelerating that by more than 25 times. There's no way for plants to adapt to keep up with the ongoing rates of change, much less for animals or other organisms, especially ones that are sessile, that are required to stay in a spot. How quickly could we lose habitat for humans? Well, I'm not making any predictions here, but it could be that industrial civilization collapses, say, the day after tomorrow, or sometime this year. If that happens, according to a paper by James Hansen and colleagues published in 2011, we will see an increase in global average temperature of 1.2 plus or minus 0.2 degrees. And that paper has subsequently been demonstrated to be conservative by 2 subsequent papers. So I think we can take the upper limit and be pretty comfortable that that's still conservative, that we can add 1.4 C with the collapse of industrial civilization. And that's because the sulfates that we put up into the air by burning fossil fuels are constantly falling out of the air too. So if we stop putting them up into the air, within 3 days or so, they all fall out. So we lose the ability to dim the planet from those sulfates, from those atmospheric particles that are reflecting solar radiation back into space. The most recent paper, published in 2013, indicates that a reduction of only 30% of the sulfate production will cause a 1 C temperature rise. So I think it's safe to conclude that when civilization collapses, and we can't sustain the unsustainable forever, obviously, when industrial civilization collapses, we will see at least a 1.4 C rise in temperature on the global average. Not to mention, we'll experience the catastrophic meltdown of the world's 447 nuclear power plants, and the exposure to the atmosphere, to the air, of the spent fuel rods and 1,200 cooling ponds that lose their water. And so, since it requires some 20 to 60 years to decommission each of those 400 and some nuclear power plants, and because we haven't started that process on any of them, that's going to be problematic when we have the kinds of fires that this planet has never witnessed, spewing ionizing radiation all over the globe. When that happens, I strongly suspect, if it happens relatively soon, that we will see a blue water event in the Arctic Ocean. We might well anyway. According to all the most recent readings, we're headed for the all-time low ice extent in the Arctic during human history. Throughout human history, the 2.8 million years of the genus Homo, for the 3 million years or so of the human experience, we have never witnessed an open water event in the Arctic. And it looks like we're headed there within the next few years, if not this year. If we see an abrupt rise by an additional 1.2 or 1.4 degrees C, I can't imagine that we won't have an open water event, a blue water event in the Arctic this September, when it historically reaches its all-time low. And according to the Arctic Methane Emergency Group, that could happen anyway, as early as this September. When that happens, I see no way that we can keep the 50 gigaton of methane that Natalia Shikova, researcher on Arctic methane, says is highly possible at any time. I don't see any way we can keep that beneath the surface without ice on the surface of the Arctic Ocean. So that 50 gigaton burst of methane, according to conservative sources, will contribute to a 1.3 degree centigrade rise in the very near future. It takes about a year for methane to completely circle the globe. The atmospheric heating of methane is more than 100 times more powerful than carbon dioxide, molecule for molecule. So we're at 0.85 degrees above baseline right now. We had 1.4 degrees from the collapse of industrial civilization, another 1.3, and these again are conservative numbers. We're at 3.55 C above baseline. And we haven't had humans at 3.3 or higher, and so we're a third of a degree higher than humans have ever observed, and more than 3/4 of that heating comes in a span of about a year or so. So there's absolutely no way for plants and animals to keep up with that sort of rate of change based on their evolutionary history. Speaking of methane is truly the elephant in the room. And judging from the mainstream media, you'd swear that there's no such thing as methane. Methane is natural gas. The mainstream media is quite willing to talk about how wonderful natural gas is as a fossil fuel, but they appear to be unwilling to talk about its potential for heating on the nightly news, which is pretty interesting because in 2007, up to 2007, it was an issue. There's a report on the NBC Nightly News from 2007 about the tremendous potential for Arctic methane to heat the planet quite abruptly. After that, the media grows completely silent about the issue. It's still there. It's still an issue. But you'd never know it reading the news. That's supposed to be, say, irreversible, but reversible, I suppose, works for me as well. Arctic ocean methane release is reported initially in the refereed journal literature in August 2009 and subsequently reported in many places, including NASA's CARV project. NASA's CARV project reported in July 2013 that methane plumes were coming out of the Arctic Ocean that were 150 kilometers across. And so this is just a bubbling ocean as far as the eye can see if you're in a ship, in every direction. So tremendous release of methane. The paper by Jennings in Global Policy, September 2012, finally admits that release of methane from the Arctic is irreversible. That's the first of these irreversible self-reinforcing feedback loops presented in the refereed journal literature, and it was reported in 2009 by a self-reinforcing feedback loop, or a so-called positive feedback, which isn't necessarily positive for us. It's a process that feeds upon itself. The faster it goes, the faster it goes. So methane is released from the floor of the Arctic Ocean as in hydrates. The hydrates break, release the methane into the atmosphere. That warms up the atmosphere, first locally, then globally, and as a consequence, causes a warming of the ocean, which leads to more methane release occurring, which causes subsequent warming, and so on. So it's a self-reinforcing feedback loop. That's the first of those reported in the refereed journal literature was 2009, and we're up to 47 now over the course of the last 6 years. Based on the one Arctic Ocean methane release, Paul Beckwith, a climate scientist at the University of Ottawa in Canada, concludes in November 2014 last year that we could experience a 5 to 6 degree temperature increase within a decade or two. He says that process has been triggered. We have entered the arena of abrupt climate change. And Beckwith is basing this projection, and it's a prediction he's making, on the basis of historical events, such as one reported in 2013 in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences of the United States, which reports a 5 degrees centigrade temperature rise in a span of 13 years based on sediment core data. And so Beckwith concludes, in fact, that we could experience a 16 degree temperature rise in that same period of time, up to 16 degrees. Farley Mowat, the writer, concludes that we're under some gross misconception that we're a good species going somewhere important, that all at the last minute we'll correct our errors and God will smile on us. It's delusion. And it's no longer the last minute. The last minute passed, probably at least 6 years ago. Maybe based on analyses of atmospheric methane as early as 2007, when it appears that the clathrate gun, or the hydrate gun in the Arctic Ocean went off. So we're past the point of no return on many levels. Unless you think I'm the only crazy person in the room. Let me back up. I probably still am the only crazy person in this room. But I'm not the only crazy person left on the planet. There are any number of voices now who are predicting near-term human extinction. Notice that Paul Beckwith is not one of them. He's a climate scientist, a laser physicist, and an engineer who thinks we'll manage to adapt to 6 sea temperature rise within a decade or two. But he's not a biologist, and I go around and around with Paul about this. that our ability to adapt is not an issue here. It's the ability of the living planet to adapt, not us, because we depend upon a living planet for our own survival. So, the question arises, now what? Now that you've been given the worst diagnosis of your life, of human life, I have to point out that we're the lucky ones. We get to die. And what that means is we get to live. And the odds against this collection of DNA coming together in physical form exceeds the odds against plucking a single atom at random from the entire universe. Ponder that for a minute. There's a lot of atoms in the universe. We know a lot about DNA. And yet here we are. It's almost as if each of us is a miracle. We get to live. The odds against that happening are truly cosmological. As evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins points out, in the teeth of these stupefying odds, it is you and I, and he should have said who, but he's British, let him get away with it, that are privileged to be here, privileged as eyes to see where we are, and brains to wonder why. It's astonishing that we not only get to live, but that in addition, we are at this point in history where we get to ponder what that means. What it means to be human at the end. What it means to have these big brains and consider, think about deeply our place in the universe. 13.8 billion years of the universe's existence, our species has been here for 250,000 years, and we think it's all about us, of course, because collectively we're nearly as narcissistic as we are individually. But in fact, it's amazing that we're here at all, as individuals or as a species. And maybe the whole show isn't about us after all. I'm pretty sure that now in her hospice, people who are at the end of their lives don't say with their final breath, I should have bought more crap. I never hear about people saying that. I hear people saying that all the time when I'm walking around, right? People going into the stores, oh, we need one of those, I need one of those, completely misunderstanding the relationship between needs and wants. And so we shop. Well, guess what? The bills come due. We've shopped ourselves to death. So what to do? For me, anyway, the message that we don't have long brings to the surface two ideas: the pursuit of love and the pursuit of excellence. So be with the ones you love. Love the ones you're with. And pursue a life of excellence, whatever that means for you. For me, it's, I'm inspired by Socrates, who I admit might well have been a figment of Plato's imagination. So maybe I'm inspired by Plato. And so for me, pursuing a life of excellence means asking questions about this culture. You know, Socrates spent his entire life, his entire adult life in a way, asking just 6 questions in various forms. 6 questions. What is courage? What is good? What is moderation? What is justice? What is piety? What is virtue? And so I ask questions too. That's the reason I'm not allowed to teach on a university campus anymore, is because I was asking questions and encouraging other people to ask questions as well. And in particular, the students, for whom the only question that the system wants them to ask is, what's not the question?
No idea. I think there's someone upstairs with the same mic. There we go. Yeah.
So the only question the system, including the university as part of the larger system, the only question that is to be asked is how much and how many? We're a culture of consumption. I'm not suggesting that excellence will be easy or fun to pursue, yet, if my experience is any guide, it can be an incredibly lonely experience. When I reached the conclusion that we're headed into the abyss at our own demise, that of near-term human extinction in 2002, I of course immediately became a pariah on campus, and I lost many of the relationships in which I was engaged. By the time I doubled down on that assessment and left active service at the university in 2009, about 6 years ago, I essentially left behind all the friends and family who had been supportive of me when I was making a lot of money for doing almost no work. So, if you actually pursue excellence instead of mediocrity, which is what we really reward in this culture, if you pursue excellence, you can plan on leaving a lot of people behind on your journey.
Shout.
We can hear you if you just speak.
But I love the noise.
I've just. That's all I can do.
Okay. I'm going to finish with a cartoon. I think I'm going to finish. I'm not sure. I never take the time, when I'm with people, as I was right before this event, I think I'm going to look at my slides right before I put them on the screen, and then I never do because I get to talking with people. So I'm constantly surprised by the stuff that appears on the screen. If you think you're surprised, imagine me. Oh yes. Oh yes, there's more. I remember now, there's more. What if he's wrong? I get this all the time, but it's never asked as a question. It's a statement, he's wrong. He couldn't possibly be right. Mind you, so far I've only presented data from collected and interpreted by other people. I left active service at the university 6 years ago. I haven't conducted primary research since then. I'm just connecting the dots. So, if I'm wrong, if all the models are wrong and all the data are wrong and all the forecasts are wrong, then guess what? You still get to die. We're still the lucky ones. We still get to die, which means we still get to live. The world's oldest person turned 117 just over a month ago. And when asked to ponder the last 117 years, she said it seemed rather short. I used to tell people, even if you live to be 100, it's not very long. Then she comes along and points out that it's not just 100. Even if you live to be 117, it's just a few memories. So in light of that, maybe we should seize those moments, every moment, and make them worthwhile for us and those around us. If you want more data, it's all right here at this one essay, as well as in those two books. But the books cost money, and the essay is free. If, in fact, we're going to die, a conclusion that I reached when I was 11, by the way, you're probably all there at some point. And even if you live to be 117, I suggested to you that it's not very long. That maybe we should live and practice love and excellence along the way, no matter how long we have in this mortal coil. That's my very limited advice in any event. And I would be happy to stop right there. So if you have any questions on your, yes, is there a question about the question process? I can tell. Thank you.
Right, could you just answer your question there, just to make sure that you don't answer your question in it's a kind of fair thing.
So one of the reasons for this is very frequently when I speak, those people come up to tell me I'm wrong, and they don't just say it in those 3 words, they say it for a half an hour or so. And in the interest of everybody's time, we would like to ask the questions instead of give a sermon. I'm here for the sermon. You're here for the questions.
Guy, can I just see that lady, that Japanese lady died this week?
She did?
Yeah.
Thanks for bringing that up.
I just thought I'd do.
I love it when I'm the cheeriest person in the room. She did really?
Yes, she was.
And you had to tell us? You could lie like everybody else does.
No, keep on. Just add to the general.
Huh. So apparently we're not going to live forever. And she's got another example. I'll be damned. Who'd have thunk it? Thanks for bringing that up, Casey. What do we got? Do you think that there is an awareness in officialdom about this? Do they really know? You know, there are people who make a lot of money and who are in positions of great power because they have access to information. And so it's inconceivable to me that the people who are pulling the levers of industry don't know what I know. Everything I told you today has been published in the referee journal literature or is available online. If you want to know everything I know, it's on my Facebook timeline. It's embarrassing to admit. I don't even have to do research anymore. Everybody does it for me. If there's a paper that comes out and it's about climate change, it gets posted on my timeline 100 times. I spend all day removing the damn thing because I'm tired of reading that paper. So yes, I know. And here's a minor example. Steve Wozniak sent me an email message in December of 2012. Steve Wozniak single-handedly built the Apple I and Apple II computers. He was one of the 3 founders, along with Steve Jobs, of Apple. So this is a guy who knows things. He's worth more than $100 million, and he sends me an email message. And I'm like, right, Steve Wozniak is sending me email messages. And so I did a little research. Sure enough, the picture was of him and Janet, his 4th wife. And he always uses an anagram of his name for his signature line. And it gets even better. His email address is upside down. And I don't know how to do that. But Steve Wozniak, I'm thinking he does know how to do that. And it's upside down because he's moving down under. He contacts me to tell me that he's moving to the Southern Hemisphere because he reads my work. And I thought that was pretty freaky, but I still had to write back and ask him, really? Are you really Steve Wozniak, or are you putting me on? Because if you lied the first time, I'm pretty sure you wouldn't lie the second time, because I'm interrogating you over email. Yeah, I think they know. I think people know what I know. I can't imagine they don't. I'm not the smartest guy in the room, much less on the planet. So I think they know. I think people are connecting the dots. You know, there's an entire agency in the United States dedicated to connecting the dots on climate change. I'm pretty sure they're telling the people in power what's going on. Next question, do you think it is the overriding reason for our costly exploration to other planets? No, I don't think they... you know, the U.S. space program got established really in the early 1960s in response to the Soviet space program. And our hubris just couldn't put up with being outdone. So I think in the early 1960s, we didn't really have a clue about climate change reaching the abrupt stage. We know about anthropogenic climate change. We've known about that since 1847 when George Perkins Marsh, U.S. ambassador and naturalist, talked about it. 1847. But abrupt climate change, we really didn't know much about that at all until the early 2000s, by which time the U.S. space program and the world space program, for that matter, was pretty much in decline already because the money's running out for those kinds of activities. So I don't think that's the underlying motivation for the world's race to populate other planets, which is, I could go on and on about that. I mean, really, we found our nest here, so we're going to go someplace else. Has anybody read the Martian Chronicles? Ray Bradbury, 1949? Right, so humans are leaving Earth because we're totally screwing it up. So we go to Mars. And the last scene of the book, if it's called a scene, a chapter, that's what they called it when they were books. Yes. It's the last chapter of the book. The people on Mars are looking down at Earth and they see Armageddon underway. They see the world being blown up by the people on Earth with nuclear weapons. And they know already that's exactly where they're headed because they haven't changed human behavior. They're acting exactly the same way as those people on Earth. They've already formed tribes that are at war with each other. So, do I think we're going to go to space? Maybe. Do I think we can find habitat there? No. We destroyed habitat here. It was nirvana, and we pissed it away for a few dollars more. Is geoengineering happening now? I have no idea. If you want to know about geoengineering and the chemtrail controversy, I would recommend to you contrailscience.com, which deconstructs all of the arguments for ongoing geoengineering.
Guy, there was some geoengineering. There was a company called Planctos a few years ago who experimented with seeding part of the Pacific Ocean with iron sulfate. It was stopped in time, but it's definitely planned, and there are live experiments taking place.
Yes, that's right. Thank you for reminding me of that, Keith. Keith Farnish in the back, author of Time's Up and Underminers, and currently just finished a young adult work of fiction. And yes, I remember that attempt at geoengineering by what we would call rogue scientists. I've been thinking too narrow of late and thinking of geoengineering as solar radiation management, or SRM, putting particulates up into the sky, as demonstrated in the movie Snowpiercer. If you've seen that, you know what I'm talking about. The reflective particles are put up in 2013, I think, and by 2030 there's like 200 people left on the planet, and they live in a train, and it's snowball Earth. It's really absurd. But it's a fine metaphor for where we're at right now, the 1% being at the end of the train and the slaves being at the back of the train. That's us, by the way. Anyway, what are the biggest assumptions made in your analysis? Wow. Of course, I'm a scientist, so I make no assumptions. Oh, wait. The biggest assumptions in my analysis, I guess the biggest assumption is depending upon the work of Paul Beckwith, which is not peer-reviewed. So Paul Beckwith studies methane in the Arctic Ocean, and his statement of 5 to 16 sea temperature rise within a decade or two has not been published in the referee journal literature. So my notion that that's the most conservative stance, I guess, is that 20 years out or a decade out we'll have this sort of temperature rise, is the biggest assumption. However, Paul relies on evidence such as that presented with proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, as I pointed out, which indicate a 5-degree temperature rise in the span of 13 years, 55 million years ago. So we know this kind of abrupt event has happened in the past, and it's capable of happening now. Based on the exponential rise of atmospheric methane, I would say that we're in the early stages of abrupt climate change. So I agree with Paul on that point. I think that's the biggest assumption, but maybe not. All right, you made me do it. How will you convince anyone to do anything if it requires such specialized knowledge? One world government.
That was a suggestion afterwards.
Oh, okay. How will you convince anyone to do anything? I'm not trying to convince anybody to do anything except pursue love and a life of excellence. I think that we're done as a species on the planet. I think that if you want to do something, if what you love involves ensuring habitat for non-human species, which is what I love to do, then you'll pursue the work of Keith Farnish in his book Underminers. You'll join me in undermining industrial civilization. But that's just me, and I get these eyebrows raised when I present such an idea. And people send me email messages and tell me they're going to tell the people in the tower that I've gone crazy.
You don't
Colin?
know how to
Yes, underminers.org is where you can find that book. But I would appreciate you buying a copy, although it's all available free online. It has a particularly great chapter written by, me. But I recommend the whole thing. Really. I think it's too late to do anything about abrupt climate change. We have triggered so many irreversible self-reinforcing feedback loops, at least irreversible over the course of the next few thousand years. Consider, for example, that a paper February 2009 Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences points out that the temperature rise associated with current levels of carbon dioxide in the air are locked in for at least the next 1,000 years. Well, we're at more than 400 parts per million carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. When we started the human experience, when we started at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, it was 280 parts per million or less. So we had this organization heavily funded by the Rockefellers called 350.org going around telling people we can get down to 350 parts per million. We can't. It's a sham. And so what to do? Live as if your life matters. And those around you as well. That's what I would suggest. I think it's too late to turn the ship around. The ship hit the iceberg. The ship is going down. What's the front of the ship called?
Tiny.
The bow. The bow. Yes, thank you. I'm quite the sailor, obviously. So the bow is up, and everybody I know thinks that means we're safe. Look, we're even higher above water than we were. Half the ship is underwater, but the bow is up even higher than it was. It's all good. We not only hit the Titanic, we hit the Titanic a long time ago, as early as 2007. There's also a 10-year lag built in. Maximum heating doesn't occur from carbon dioxide release until 10 years after the carbon dioxide is put into the atmosphere. None of that's accounted for yet, and isn't accounted for by my assessment of it leading to a 3.55 C temperature rise. Also, we burned more fossil fuels in the last decade than any previous decade in human history. So the heating associated with that is all locked in. And it's locked in a bad way. When carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere were 380 parts per million, a panel that presented at COP15 in Copenhagen concluded that the sea level rise was 23 meters or more higher associated with that 380 parts per million. And temperature rise of 6 C was guaranteed. There's just going to be a little lag, as there always has. That's based not on models. No modeling was done. That's based on what has happened in history, in planetary history. So 380 parts per million means at least 6 C all by itself, never mind methane. And it's pretty evident at this point that we fired the class breakdown. I'm just going on and on, I'm sorry.
What happened 55 million years ago that caused a 15-degree increase? What was that?
Methane was released in what's called the Siberian traps, in what is currently Russia. So permafrost became permamelt, as it's done now. And there was tremendous methane release due in part to volcanism in the area. And so that led to this rapid rise in temperature. So we're seeing the same sort of thing, except this time the methane is being released out of the Arctic Ocean instead of from the Siberian traps. But that's probably on its way. Permafrost is going away very quickly too. Are the 70s phase back? Something about self-reinforcing feedback loops. Are they all separate? Well, they actually interact with each other. So, for example, the methane release from the Arctic Ocean is related to the thinning of Arctic ice in the same region. So consider, for example, if you have a container of your favorite beverage that's not beer in your hand, and it has a bunch of ice in it, and you walk around for an hour or two at the party, and as long as there's a little bit of ice in there, the temperature is 0 degrees centigrade. Just the littlest bit of ice, 0 degrees C. Half an hour after that last little bit of ice melts, it's room temperature. We're about to see the Arctic ice go away. We've never seen that in human history. What kind of warming of the ocean will there be then, without any ice to absorb the heat? We don't know. There are no analogs for that event. But I can assure you that based on the latent heat of the lack of ice, that we will see a tremendous rise very rapidly in the temperature in the oceans. The ocean is a battery, and already there's an enormous amount of heat stored in the ocean, and also an enormous amount of carbon dioxide. When that heat starts coming out, as it looks like it's doing now as a result of the El Nino that has just started, when that heat comes out, it could by itself produce a 1.25, 1.5 degree temperature rise around the world. That gets us beyond 2C. And we lose civilization at that point because we lose the ability to grow grains. The interior of large continents warm up at least twice as fast as the global average. Once you're at 2.5 degrees C for the global average, you're at 4 or 5 for the interior of large continents, so you aren't growing any more wheat. There goes the corn harvest, there goes everything we need to maintain civilization at this sort of scale, because we aren't growing those grains as food anymore. So that could happen without the Arctic Ocean, without the Arctic ice going away. That could happen without a collapse of civilization. Just from the El Nino coming out this year, as has been forecast. In fact, a weak El Nino is already underway. So that alone could trigger the collapse of industrial civilization. Yes.
Will the sea absorb so much heat that it might not refreeze? Will the ocean absorb so much heat from the sun?
Yeah, that could be. Yeah, you know, we've just literally never been here before. Based on proxy records from the deep past, the ocean has stored a bunch of CO2 before, released a bunch of that carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and that has been responsible for the consequent increased heating of the globe. Okay, so that carbon dioxide, once released, having been stored in the oceans for a while. And so we're at that point. You know, we haven't had a significant El Nino event since 1997. I believe it was 97, 98. That we had a significant El Nino event. It's been a long time since we've had one of those. We're due. We're past due, actually, for a big El Nino event to release a bunch of heat into the atmosphere.
I heard recently that Antarctic sea ice is increasing. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct. She asked if the Antarctic sea ice is increasing. It was up until about a year ago. Last month, the temperature in the Antarctic reached an all-time high, and then it broke that all-time high the next day. It was warmer in Antarctica for the entire week than it was in New York. You know, Antarctica, it's ice. And it's not just ice floating around the ocean, it's ice on land. It's a tremendous amount of ice. It essentially never gets above freezing there. It was 63.5 degrees Fahrenheit. And so that's about, what, 20, what's that temperature in centigrade? Anybody? 15, 16 degrees centigrade, something like that. So well above freezing in Antarctica. The West Antarctic ice shelf is the one that mainstream scientists have been worried about for a really long time. And it's been decaying rapidly over the course of the last decade. More rapidly in the last 3 years than in the previous 30 years. And then just 2 weeks ago, we discovered through scientific research that the East Antarctic ice shelf is at an accelerating pace disappearing. So for a while, Antarctica, the ice extent was nearly keeping up with the Arctic ice decline, but the thickness of that ice was very thin. And so the total volume of ice was little, even in Antarctica, and now it's all going away. It's all going away. So it's accelerating in its decline as well. Yeah, Mike?
I think that's such an important point about the extent of the ice cover and the volume of the ice cover. That's not get that mixed up. Sometimes the extent is interpreted as the volume or the mass of the ice, and it's not the extent of coverage we're talking about here, it's the amount of ice. Yeah. So the question for Guy is, can you tell us a little bit about what you may have heard recently about the Gulf Stream? Because we live over here in Scotland, and we're kind of used to the Gulf Stream coming over, and I've heard it from pretty trusted scientists that we've got a bit of a problem with the Gulf Stream slowing down and possibly stopping because of the Arctic ice now.
Right, and this has happened, I believe, 6 times in planetary history that the Gulf Stream has stopped or reversed course. This is also called the thermohaline conveyor belt, and it also has a name that's long that I can barely pronounce, so I won't. And essentially this is water coming up from the Atlantic Ocean, warm water coming up from the Atlantic Ocean, it's part of the Gulf Stream, and bringing warm water and therefore warm air to Europe, and especially Northern Europe. It's why Paris, France, at the same latitude as Montreal, Canada, where it's really cold all the damn time. Paris, France, everybody escapes to go to the south of France in the summer because it's too hot. Right, so even at this very high latitude, we have warming coming from the warm Atlantic Ocean, the warm water, and therefore the warm air that blows across that warm water here. So what could possibly go wrong? Has anybody seen the movie The Day After Tomorrow? And is willing to admit it? I haven't, but that didn't stop me from writing an extended op-ed piece about it on that. Because once you're a middle-aged white American professor, you think you can get away with just about anything and be right about it. The Day After Tomorrow presents a scenario in which the Gulf Stream reverses course, as it has done 6 times in planetary history. And it actually models, or follows a paper, a white paper written by the Pentagon by 2 guys named Schwartz and Randall, in which they predict abrupt climate change in 2003. So I think the movie came out in 2003, 2004. And it portrays events happening like in seconds. You know, the Gulf Stream stops, and the next day there's a glacier in New York City, right? And then I'm pretty sure dinosaurs show up or something. The whole thing is Hollywood.
We've only got 90 minutes. We've only got 90 minutes.
But this thing did reverse course. And so in the course of 90 minutes, you know, the whole story had to play out. And in fact, what has happened in the past is that has triggered an ice age in Northern Europe and even in the northern half, approximately, of North America. Because now we don't have warm Atlantic water providing its boost. What does this mean? I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether it means an ice age is coming or that methane release in the atmosphere will overwhelm the cooling effect of the slowed or stopped or reversed thermohaline conveyor belt. I don't know what it means. I'm pretty sure it's not good regardless, but I don't know how bad it is. Is it bad enough, meaning good enough to counteract the methane in the atmosphere so that we'll all be living in Scotland and Russia soon? It would surprise me. I don't know. I think we just don't know.
Just as an add-on, just a quick add-on to that, if we just under temperature increases actually in the Arctic itself.
Oh yeah, temperature increase in the Arctic Ocean has been phenomenal since 2010, when instead of reversing course off the coast of Greenland, as the thermohaline conveyor belt has always done before in human history, instead, starting I think it was 2010, might have been 2009, the warm Atlantic water started shooting up through the Fram Strait off the north and east coast of Greenland and taking warm Atlantic water right into the Arctic. And so what we saw then was an Arctic that was 10 or 20 degrees Fahrenheit warmer, which means I think 7 to 15 degrees centigrade warmer than had ever been observed before. So again, these things interact. That warm water goes up there, contributes to the melting, contributes to the methane release, and now we've got 3 self-reinforcing feedback loops that are feeding off each other, as well as feeding off themselves. So, you know, we don't know with great accuracy what the future holds, obviously. So that's why I think my message of pursuing excellence and pursuing what you love is not a bad message, regardless, even if you live to be 117 and then die the following month. Thanks for that, Ace. Humans are amazing, the question says. Oh, there's no question mark on it. Don't you think we could fix it and surprise ourselves? If not, why not just party till the end? Okay, I have so much to say about this, I hardly know where to begin. Don't you think we could fix it ourselves and surprise ourselves? So there's some great work by Tim Garrett, atmospheric scientist at the University of Utah, pointing out that civilization is a heat engine. That as long as we maintain civilization in any form, solar panels, wind turbines, wave power, whatever, we're still screwed. Because civilization itself is the heat engine. So do I think we could be clever enough that we could surprise ourselves and fix it? Not with civilization. So at this point, as I already pointed out, when civilization collapses, that leads to an abrupt warming well above the 2 degrees mark that some batshit crazy economist convinced scientists was a good target. And so if we terminate civilization today, that takes us over 2 degrees C in a span of days or maybe weeks. And if we don't terminate civilization today, that means we keep adding to the heat. And it doesn't matter if we're all on solar panels or not. Civilization is a heat engine. So can we fix it? We are amazing. And no, I don't think we can fix it. If not, why not just party till the end? And people ask me this question a lot, and usually I speak in the United States, so this applies to a far greater extent than it does here in Western Europe, but it also applies here. So somebody asked me, won't people party like it's 1999? And I'll say, really? Americans become hedonistic? How the hell would I tell the difference? We do everything we want. We have the world's reserve currency. We do. When I was a kid, and I know you love stories that start like that. When I was 17, I was the first person in my immediate family to fly in commercial aircraft. My parents didn't have enough money. My older brother didn't fly until after I did. I was 17 years old. Now you'd be hard-pressed to find a 17-year-old American who hasn't made the obligatory trip to Europe to see another culture. They could go to the Indian reservation 20 miles away and actually experience another culture, but instead they come to Western Europe to experience the exact same culture. Party like it's 99, we're there. We have everything we want. We have everything we need. And what do we need? What do we think we need in response to that? More. More of everything. Will we party to the end? I have no doubt some people are partying till the end. Most.
So what about avoiding the worst by choosing a more radical lifestyle, which is more equal to just integrating more
Austerity? You're proposing austerity? That's been working great. When people propose that idea politically in Europe, they get tarred and feathered. Yes, I live an austere life. I live in a straw bale house on a rock pile in the desert. The house is heated with solar panels, and I have a 3.15 kilowatt solar system. My wife and I share the property with another couple and their young son. So we have 5 people living in a space that most Americans would consider appropriate for 1 person. So I live a relatively austere lifestyle, in part because when I made the commitment to move there about 8 years ago, things weren't so dire on the climatic front as they are today. But also because I was committed to living differently. If everybody did that, no, not everybody will do that for starters. For example, when it was proposed to Greece that they reduce their retirement payments from 14 months a year to 13, last I checked there were only 12 months of the year, but Greek retirees were getting 14 monthly payments for retirement. When it was proposed that they not do that anymore, they started rioting in the streets. And you mentioned the word austerity in the political environment, and people started setting cars on fire, which I've always thought was a good idea, but sort of for the wrong reason. So austerity, I don't think that's going to take off. But if it did, would it help? Yes, it would help. It would help non-human species. We have fired the Clathrate gun. It's too late for our species. Does that mean I think we shouldn't do anything? No, not at all. I don't think it's all about us. I'm a conservation biologist. I've been studying the extinction rates for a long time. According to a now nearly 5-year-old report put out by the United Nations, not exactly an extremely liberal organization, by the way, we drive to extinction 150 to 200 species every day. I think that's a bad idea. What allows us to do that, what requires us to do that apparently, is industrial civilization. It also allows us to foul the air and dirty the waters and screw up erosion rates, dump all the soil into the ocean and drive us further into human population overshoot at the rate of more than 200,000 people every day. So I think we should stop. I think we should stop. And I think that will kill us all. But we're all going to die anyway. See? Don't you feel lucky already? We're the lucky ones. We get to die. Do you agree that our position is not a moral question and that it is an inevitable consequence of human population growth that we could never have managed? No. I could go on, as you know. And I will. I know of at least 4 cases. The Olmec, the Chaco, and where I lived, the Mimbres. Each of those cultures discovered civilization. Their societies collapsed. They still had the means of civilization. They still had the means of grain. Let's take the specific example where I lived, the Mimbres culture, which discovered corn, or maybe corn discovered them, 900 and, I believe it was 991 years ago. And then 971 years ago, a few survivors walked away. 20 years before the society completely collapsed. It went into human population overshoot at the local level. By year 17, they were eating their seed corn, their maize, eating the seeds. By 20 years, they're effectively all dead. A few survivors walked away, and when they came back, they never used corn again. And it was 600 years before Columbus sailed the, and killed everybody there. So that's one example. The Olmec and the Chaco are 2 more examples, and then the 4th example. People have walked away from civilization and lived to tell about it. Whole societies have walked away from civilization and thrived to tell about it. It is not deterministic that we will drive ourselves to extinction through human population overshoot and all that goes with it. I don't think it's deterministic at all. And I disagree on this point with Paul Czapurka, an ecologist for whom I have great respect, and many other people, that we've made choices. We are capable of making choices. As entire societies, we have made choices that don't point us towards civilized outcomes. Do you think we have, or have had for a while, the technology to get off fossil fuels, but it's deliberately not been implemented properly by the powers that be? No. I could go on. Oh, why don't I? Solar panels and wind turbines and wave power, those are all derivatives of fossil fuel. They require a tremendous amount of fossil fuels to make and to maintain. So let's assume, for example, that we can maintain the electric grid throughout the entirety of Western Europe with solar panels and wind turbines. Let's just assume that it's a given that somebody made that decision in 1957, right after hearing King Hubbard speak about global oil peaking, and so civilization going away. That Western Europe said, shortly after World War II, we're going solar panels and wind turbines, and that's all there is to it. Well, how do you maintain that grid? Liquid fuels. Pure and simple. Liquid fuels are required at this point to maintain the electrical grid. Yeah, there's like 10 Teslas out there in the world powered by solar panels and the electrical grid that's maintained by fossil fuels. So, had we made different decisions 60 years ago, we would be in a completely different situation. But I think it's too late to turn the ship around at this point. For several reasons. One, we're talking about fossil fuels to make all that equipment to put up on our rooftops and out in the fields with wind turbines. And it's all maintained by liquid fuels. And there's so many reasons that we can't get off the fossil fuels at this late date. And it's too late anyway. We fired the class rate gun. It's game over. We're locked in. And if we don't maintain civilization by burning fossil fuels, this is an amazing story. And I didn't just make it up just now. Probably the 2 most famous climate scientists in the world are Michael Mann and James Hansen. James Hansen recently retired from the United States government. Michael Mann working at Pennsylvania State University. And Michael Mann, in a recent interview with Tom Hartman, concluded that we need to keep burning fossil fuels, especially coal. the dirtiest of the fossil fuels, because we need to put those sulfates up into the atmosphere. Because once those sulfates all fall out, we're going to lose that denting potential. As we saw in the wake of 9/11, when nothing happened except the occasional US plane stopped flying, and there was a huge signature in the global average temperatures as a result. So Michael Mann, one of the most famous climate scientists in the world, says, first of all, we need to keep burning coal. And if that isn't enough to make me want to punch him in the throat, he goes on and say, until we figure out a way at scale to remove the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, we need to keep burning the coal. And I'm thinking, intergovernmental report relies on fantasy technology. Where have I seen that headline again? Oh, that's right, Truth Out, April 2014. So, proposing that we continue to burn fossil fuels because it's the only way to prevent planetary overheating is insane. But, this is America. Insanity is what we do. Why do you think the IPCC chooses to ignore or suppress the effect of methane? I think they just don't know, because the assessments come out so much later than the information is revealed. So the IPCC relies only on referee journal literature. That's it. That's the bottom line. To make it into their assessment, it has to be published. Okay, so it has to be published. Then the IPCC meets for 2 years. Committees and subcommittees meet for a couple of years, based on the referee journal literature. Of course, by the time it appears in the referee journal literature, it's at least 1.5 years old, and probably closer to 3 years old. So the information is dated by the time the IPCC looks at it. Then they look at it for 2 years, and they vet it through the political process for another 18 months to 2 years. Then they put out their report. Oh, wow, methane hadn't been widely reported in the referee journal literature, hadn't been reported at all, Arctic methane, until 2009. The IPCC started meeting in 2007 for the 5th assessment. They were essentially done in 2009. And then it gets vetted through all the stuff. And then, of course, it relies on consensus before they can make even a single statement. And then it gets vetted through the political process and watered down even further. So I think the information just was not reported in the referred journal literature in time to make it into the IPCC report. Could abrupt cooling happen sooner than runaway warming because of the thermohaline collapse, Younger Dryas event? And the Younger Dryas is the most recent time we had that reversal of the thermohaline conveyor belt. Could abrupt cooling happen sooner than runaway warming? Warming. Warning, it's getting warming. Yes, it could. Predictions are tough, especially about the future. And we particularly suck at predictions involving the climate. So it could be that we have abrupt cooling in some parts of the globe while we're experiencing runaway warming in others. And in fact, I think we have a little bit of evidence to support that right now. For the last 2-3 years, it's been colder and wetter in Northern Europe than average. And many other places around the planet, it's been warm and dry in comparison. So people from the United States tell me all the time, look, you think that there's such a thing as global warming, and Boston just got more snowfall than they've ever had in their entire history. See, told you, it's getting colder, I saw a snowflake. Which is why we call it climate change, not global warming. Yes, it's overall general planetary warming, but it produces these weird things like California is experiencing the drought that will last forever, according to a paper in the referred journal literature. And at the same time, on the other coast, because of the meandering jet stream or Rossby wave, we have extremely cold, wet winter at the same time that it's extremely dry and warm in California. It's climate change. It doesn't mean that it's going to be hot everywhere all the time from now on. We haven't gone Venus yet. We might. According to a paper in Journal of Astrophysics in early 2013, the Earth is within 1% of the habitable range. We're a lot closer to the sun than we realized. We thought we were in this green zone, right in the middle of the green zone, or the habitable zone, for a sun with our kind of energy. turns out, we just found out from the astrophysics community, just a couple of years ago, that we're within 1% of being uninhabitable. So if we make minor changes in atmospheric chemistry, we could potentially go Venus and have the kind of atmosphere that is toxic for life. And as it turns out, we haven't made minor changes in atmospheric chemistry on this planet. We've increased carbon dioxide more than 40% and methane by more than 200% in the atmosphere. So we made major changes in atmospheric chemistry. It could be that we've triggered a Venus-style event. Or maybe not. We won't know. We won't know ever. The planet won't know for a while. One of your temperature changes in the beginning comes from rapid industrial collapse. What makes you think industrial collapse will be rapid rather than a slow petering out? I don't know. And as I said, I wasn't making a prediction. I'm just saying that it could happen. So it's been a slow decline for a long time. The world's macroeconomic metrics all peaked in 1999 or 2000. So we're in the midst of a slow decline of industrial civilization. And not surprisingly, according to BP data, oil hit the undulating plateau of extraction in 1998. So as a result, I would argue, we have seen this relatively slow decline since 99 or 2000. I'm saying that in the worst case scenario for humans, it could be that we see a rapid completion of an ongoing decline, and that would be sufficient to raise global average temperatures by 1.4 or more altogether in a relatively short period of time. It could happen. I'm not saying it will happen. Why is this subject not addressed in the media? Who owns the media?
Rupert Murdoch.
Oh, Rupert Murdoch. Yeah, that's a big piece of it. In the United States, yeah. In the United States, there are a handful of corporations that own more than 90% of the media. Do you think it's in the best interest of the corporations to tell people they're going to die? Ever? Then people will...
Panic buying.
Well, panic buying. I should have bought more crap. I'm going to die. I need 75 more pair of shoes.
Changing lifestyle or anything too.
Right, a change in lifestyle. No, I don't think the corporate media and the corporate government, I don't think their best interests are in us buying less crap.
Like this.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was going to ask that question.
Uh-huh.
Do you think that with the internet pressing control of information away from the standard media, that the notion that some powerful man can control the whole thing is incorrect?
I absolutely agree.
Read much about near-term human extinction in blogs and other news aggregation websites.
You're reading the wrong ones. You should go to this site right here. It's epic.
Guys, there's another one as well.
Extinction Radio.
And the Facebook group.
Oh yes, yes. There are several Facebook groups that focus specifically on near-term human extinction. One of them, started by McPherson, was the first of those, and it's called the Near-Term Human Extinction Support Group.
Thanks, Guy.
There are a few others as well that start with near-term human extinction and then fill in the blank. Dar Jamail is an astonishing journalist, an independent journalist. He was one of the very few unembedded journalists in the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, conquests, conducted by the United States. When you're an embedded journalist, you're required to vet all of your reports through the Pentagon. And Dar Jamail just went over there. Dar Jamail was living in Alaska at the time. And he got irritated because he thought he wasn't being told the truth. So he said, I'm going to be a journalist. And he just went over there and started reporting, and he's become a renowned journalist. When he discovered my work about a year and 3 months ago, he decided to commit all of his effort to abrupt climate change. So he writes at Truth Out now, and you can read an essay by him every Monday in the United States, every week about abrupt climate change. So some places are saying, again, it was Truth Out that in April of last year used that headline in the governmental report, Relies on Fantasy Technology. So there are a few places where some media are starting to raise the alarm. They're overwhelmed, of course, by the corporate media, which is overwhelming most people. And I have a bunch of people in my life, including many members of my family, who just can't go there. Michael Mann, when asked about near-term human extinction by a friend of mine who lives in New Zealand, said, I can't go there. He's a climate scientist, but he can't go there. He can't go to human extinction. He can put out he can conduct these studies that indicate with considerable certainty, just by connecting a few dots, that we're headed for the abyss. But he can't go there. So he can't talk about it, he can't write about it psychologically.
Is that because he won't, or because other people won't let him?
I don't know. I suspect it's because he has children.
George Monbiot's got the same point of view when he was challenged by Paul Kingsnorth. He refused to consider the end of civilization, essentially for the same reason. He couldn't envisage that possibility, he didn't want to envisage that possibility. And there are a lot of, just as a warning, there are a lot of groups, Facebook groups for instance, there are lots of people who try to give you the idea that there are lots of people who really care, like Guy does. You've got to be very careful, because when you said about the media is becoming less centrally controlled, no, it's not actually, it's no less centrally controlled, it's simply the computer companies own more of it than the classic corporations. We get stuck into what are known as social media bubbles. So we think there's lots of support for what we believe, but only because we're only looking in certain places. And Facebook, for instance, selects what we see.
Right. And so there's this normalcy bias.
Yeah.
So almost everybody believes that the near future will be like the recent past. And we're wired that way, evolutionarily. Right? Because we're not designed, we're not built evolutionarily to deal with abrupt changes. So we predict into the future based on what has happened in the recent past, because that's what's always worked for human beings. And so the media play into that. And they have their own motivations from the economic perspective to not scare the masses. But there's more too. I mean, if you're constantly looking at one thing, and that's all you're looking at, then you assume that that's right. And so I think that's most of the media as well. My brother's a professor of mass communications at a small liberal arts college, and we can't talk about it. We can't talk about anything, consumer society, because he's in the university system, which is part of industrial civilization, which means that the dominant narrative, the only one universities put out, for the most part, is that shopping is good. That we're a consumer society, and so we better keep on consuming, because it's hard to imagine any other way to live.
So is it possible to live a life of excellence by keeping that silence?
I don't know what pursuing a life of excellence means for any one of you. I know what it means for me. But there's some bits of evidence that people are unwilling to accept, much less spread around. And I think some of those people are pursuing lives of excellence. It's hard once you go down one rabbit hole, once you become radical about a topic. And radical, by the way, means to get to the root of. It doesn't mean extremist. So once you go down any particular rabbit hole, I think you find yourself going down a whole bunch of others. So once you accept the idea that we have entered the arena of abrupt climate change, then maybe you're willing to go down a bunch of other rabbit holes that previously you were unwilling to go down. And so when I talk about my brother, in this not very favorable light, as unwilling to pursue any number of topics, I think if you would broach one, you would be more willing to pursue the others. But he just can't break the shackles of culture. That's my interpretation.
That must be so.
What's that?
That must restore
Yeah.
for you.
It's, well, yeah, you know, when I left active service in the University, my entire family is comprised of educators. You know, my parents were educators, my dad retired as a superintendent of schools, my brother is a professor, and my sister works in the public school system, so they're all educators, but I had the brass ring. I was a full professor by the age of 40. I had it all. I couldn't be let go. I was tenured, and I left. And so they assumed that, like most of the people I knew, that I had either gone crazy or made a horrible mistake. I don't know about the crazy part. I'm pretty sure I made a horrible mistake. So they were right about that. But it made it difficult to communicate with those people after that. And it still is. So, thus the conclusion that it was a mistake. It's the greatest mistake of my life so far. But I'm not dead yet.
Like you mean that, you would have had more influence by staying in the tent? rather-
Yes, I think so. I think it would have had the potential for more influence by staying within the tent. In the end, I was teaching honor students and inmates. I was teaching in various incarceration facilities, and I was dragging honor students into them because the dean of the honors college didn't ban me from teaching. It was only within my own department that I wasn't allowed to teach. So I was still able to reach a relatively few people, and I had money. You know, now I have to rely upon a gift economy to give any presentation. People of my caliber who do public speaking draw $5,000 or $10,000 per presentation. I pay for all the money. Seems a little twisted. You know, had I kept sucking at the government teeth, I'd be able to give these presentations to far more people, far more frequently than I'm able to. Have you had any interaction with the Dark Mountain Project? Yes. I have submitted a couple of essays to them and they were just a little too dark. Really, I mean, you can't go there, it's bizarre. Why is only Shakova dealing with the flat rate gun? She's not. There are several people who are bloggers or climate scientists or who do scholarly work on climate science. Shakova has a research partner, Samelatov. I quoted her because that was her line. There is Paul Beckwith, who is talking about the flat rate gun. He's a part-time professor at the University of Ottawa. There's Harold Hensel. I don't know what his employment status is, but he writes and speaks about it. There's Sam Carana, and I don't know what he does for a living, but I'm pretty sure that's a name he made up. So he might work within the government, and therefore he can't reveal his true identity. There's Malcolm Light, a retired Earth system scientist who lives in London, I believe, who writes about the flat rate gun pretty prolifically. So there are a handful of people. Only Paul Beckwith, Natalia Shakova, and Samelatov are employed within the climate science academic community, to my knowledge. I don't know about Sam Carano, where his money comes from. And there's this guy, Michael Jennings at the University of Idaho, who wrote the paper in Global Policy in 2012 that I had up there on the screen. And he's in the geography department at the University of Idaho. So there's a few people who are writing and speaking about stuff that actually matters. But they're few and far between. The Easter Islanders survived complete ecocide. Couldn't we? Well, we'll see.
So nuclear reactors, then?
The nuclear reactors are damn inconvenient. I'll grant you that.
447, did you say?
I think it's 442. Hell of a way to boil water. What's that?
I don't think Easter Islanders did split. They all cut down all their trees and just.
Yeah, but there was a small group of people huddled up when somebody came along with a ship and discovered them. So there were a few survivors. But that was Easter Island. We're talking planet Easter Island. We're killing everything, not just little islands worth.
Genetically engineered cyborg humans spreading their DNA on space probes through the galaxy.
As the the Borg said,
Yeah.
resistance is
Look
futile.
out, here we come.
But you'll notice that there was resistance from Jean-Luc Picard, and that's what saved the day. Resistance is fertile. Just saying. The Easter Islanders survived completely beside, couldn't we? And, you know, again, we don't, if as Tim Garrett points out, only collapse of industrial civilization prevents runaway climate change, and now it appears too late for that, and then trigger runaway climate change, then maybe complete collapse would save us, except for those darn 442 nuclear power plants and the 1,200 fuel ponds, cooling ponds with the spent fuel rods in them. So it seems to me that we're damned if we do and damned if we don't. My proposal in light of that information is to do, of course. 3.5 degrees does not seem like much. Please explain in general terms the implications of this. Already, evolution by natural selection is being outstripped by ongoing climate change by a factor of 10,000. So species just cannot evolve and they can't move. So people tell me all the time, we'll just plant grain in Canada and Alaska. No, we won't. I mean, we could, but the soils there are completely non-conducive to growing grain. Soils evolved, developed in concert with the vegetation on a site. So the nation's breadbasket, in the case of the United States, is the interior portion of North America. And we can't just take all those grains and move them up to Canada and Alaska because the soils are all screwed up. You can't grow, you can grow wheat and corn and soybeans in mollisols. You can't grow them in spodosols. You can't grow them in gelisols. It doesn't work. Same for Russia. It's a certain kind of soil that supports the vegetation that is grown there, including the crops we plant. So, no, we just can't pick up a node. The best/worst case example of picking up and moving is Biosphere 2. You've probably heard about Biosphere 2. It's this project in the desert near Tucson, Arizona, funded to the tune of millions of dollars by the Bass brothers from Texas, to create an artificial environment in which biospherians would live and thrive and prosper. And the biospherians were put in Biosphere 2, 8 of them, for 2 years. And on average, they opened the doors, they plan to open the doors 0 times in that 2 years to prove that we can live in an enclosed environment. And they opened it more than once a week. Because stuff went wrong. Who would have thunk it? They had infinite energy supply, and every one of the 8 biospherians lost weight. Human carrying capacity of that environment was probably about 6 people, which if we extend to the planetary average and using infinite energy and putting it into food and water production allows us to have 6 billion people or so on the planet. Oh wait, we have more than that now. Could be we're an overshoot. So we could do it in Biosphere 2, throwing millions and millions of dollars at it and an infinite amount of fossil energy. So it's difficult for me to imagine a scenario that will put ourselves in space on Mars, have a complete transformation of human behavior so that we don't all kill each other and manage to get along peacefully. But it could be that I'm just a cynic.
Do you think we could come up with a message to send out across the galaxy for any other budding, industrial species? It's like, okay, when you notice the infinity that's your whole planet, I think we should take that one seriously. I know competitions, it's good fun.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. We maybe should send out that message. But Fermi's paradox indicates that it wouldn't work anyway. Fermi wrote his so-called paradox in 1950.
Oh, there's always luck.
There's always luck. And aliens. And God. I hear of all these things that are going to save us. And they sound like just a great roll of the dice. So Fermi pointed out that any society that becomes sufficiently advanced to undertake interplanetary travel will drive itself to extinction first. Because they become so clever. that they can exploit everything until they kill themselves. So maybe he was just a cynic.
I mean, I think,
He didn't know about luck.
that's a really interesting question. So you've got this, you've got the left versus the right or the whatever, and you've got like the people saying, okay, this is the edge of the infinity, kids. Stop. It's like, you know, when you get old, when you're 3, you punch your dad in the face. But when you're 7, you punch him in the face. And he's like, hey, do you know what I mean? Get out of it. And you need to give your kids some space to play. And then as he gets older, the infinities change, right? The boundaries, like it's the same thing. When you get to the you know what I mean, the boundary of the whole. So you've got the lefties saying, hey, excuse me, this is the boundary of everything, guys.
Right.
And the others going, yeah, but you know, I can just I can make £1 million just if I sidestep that. And
Right. So there's a couple of issues there. Yes, there are the lefties, and they're all dead now. And all we're left with is righties and extreme far batshit crazy righties. I mean, that's the balance. I mean, if Ronald Reagan was running for election today, or Margaret Thatcher for that matter, they couldn't be elected to the local school board. Because they're viewed as such liberals. Their ideas are so far left at this point. Right? Almost nobody knows the great progressive Barack Obama hailed Ronald Reagan as his political hero during his first campaign. So that's how far this country, this world, this civilized world has swung to the right, is there is no left anymore.
That's considered insane. Like the Greens,
Yes.
The Greens could never actually run an actual government.
Right. And then there's you brought up punching in the face. Right? So that great moral philosopher Mike Tyson. You know him as a boxer. I know him as a moral philosopher. He said, the greatest quote ever from Mike Tyson, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. So we've punched the plan in the face repeatedly, and now we think recycling will save us. We're unwilling to make any sort of substantive change in our behavior, and we've been unwilling for, well, at least my entire life. And so now what? We just keep punching the planet in the face. 150 to 200 species driven to extinction every day. We had 207,000 people to the planet every single day. When do we stop? Only when we run out of fossil energy sufficiently to cause our own decline. As a civilization. That's when. We're not going to willingly do it. Derek Jensen has spoken to thousands and thousands of people over the last 2 decades, and he asked every audience, does anybody think we will willingly make a transformation to a sustainable society? And in thousands of people, one person has answered yes, has raised his hand and said yes. Derek Jensen said, willingly? And the guy said, oh no, that's not what I meant. So,
It's a similar question. It's like, can you have a civilization that evolves without the contrast brought about by slavery, without the contrast of living conditions,
right.
to galvanize?
Right, that's where we are, right?
Yeah, like
We have slaves.
if you had all 7 billion people all on the same playing field, all trying to come up with a solution.
How are you going to do that? That's not civilization, either.
Well, exactly.
Civilization is defined by inequality.
Exactly. By the gap.
Right.
That motivates people or something.
So, could we do it? Maybe, but it's too late now. I mean, and I don't think we're deterministic. I don't think it's a given that we were going to drive ourselves to extinction. It's a given that we're going to go extinct, because every species goes extinct. There's no question about that. At some point you run out of habitat for your species, because in the case of every other species, because of external events, mostly driven by civilized humans. But in our case, it's an internal thing, driven by civilized humans. I'm starting to see a pattern here. And so I don't think it's inevitable that we ended up where we did. I think it's inevitable that at some point we go extinct. I think that it's inevitable that if we observe a temperature rise of more than 4 C in a short period of time, we'll be extinct shortly thereafter, because we're going to run out of habitat. That's the issue here. Habitat, habitat, habitat. We need it just like every other animal. We can't go to space. We can put people in space and have them live there for a long time. But how do we do that? We send food all the time. Right? We're constantly sending stuff up there. It's not like they're growing potatoes on the International Space Station. I'm from Idaho. I have to throw in the potato line.
Guy, what decade? I know it's a how near is near. We get this question all the time on the support group that I try to manage. How near is near to you? What decade?
Well, it's difficult for me to imagine we make it to 2030, but I'm an optimist. You know, it could very well be that collapse of industrial civilization happens within the next couple of years. It wouldn't surprise me at all. Even if it doesn't, we could very well see the loss of Arctic ice. We're on track for that to happen within the next couple of years. If that happens, that causes sufficient warming because of that methane burst that is highly likely at any time or highly possible at any time that Chicago warns about. When that happens, we get that 1.3 C temperature rise. And then it's too warm for civilization, so civilization goes away shortly thereafter. So it could be either or, it could be either one of those events. Collapse of industrial civilization leads to the methane burst coming out of the Arctic Ocean, or the methane burst coming out of the Arctic Ocean causes the collapse of industrial civilization. But we add those together and we're at least 3.55 degrees above baseline in a very short period of time. Will we survive that? I don't know. I don't think in the Northern Hemisphere we will. Not for very long, because of loss of habitat.
But we can make it so that the rest of the Earth can carry on after us and recover.
We can kill the fewest possible species. Yes, and I'm a huge fan of that.
Really.
Right. I mean, that's what I work toward, is killing the least.
I mean, as the
It's a noble goal.
it's not all about us necessarily.
Right.
You never know. Maybe one of the results of us leaving all this crap everywhere is that it has an effect on biology, such that something cooler than us turns up
Right.
and does better than us and is much better at doing things and lives in a sustainable fashion.
Yeah, it could be George Carlin was right, that we were put here to make plastic. And so we're left with plastic world and we're done now. We can go, because we have plastic everywhere. Or as the old guy said to Dustin Hoffman in The Graduate, the future, boy, plastics. That's right. Long after humans are no longer on the planet, plastics will be. That's our legacy. You should be proud. So I don't know when. I don't think anybody can predict with certainty when we're going to lose the last human. The last human won't know anyway. Right? When the last human disappears, they're not going to know they're the last person. So, it'll be quiet, and they'll have all the money. Which is the goal if you're going to be the last human, obviously, is to have all the money. You don't have to worry about distribution of wealth that way, because you got it all. So, I don't know, but I think the message is unaltered regardless. I think that my message, which is pursue what you love and pursue excellence in your life, I think it doesn't matter if you live to be 117 in a month, thanks AC, or if you live another 5 years, or if you live another week. I think that message is valid regardless. You still get to die. Woohoo. And how you tell that to people is going to vary. People ask me all the time.
But why tell it to people though? I mean, if we're all going to die anyway, why don't we just let everybody just get on with everything and do their thing? And
because maybe some people want to know. So you might ask them the asteroid question. I was on a plane flight from Dallas to London 2 days ago, or maybe yesterday. Was it yesterday? God, it was just
I don't know, I'm losing track of time as well, guys.
And there was this young woman sitting next to me, and I could tell she wanted to talk about human extinction, because she kept looking out the window. And so we got into a conversation. She asked what I did. I said what I'm speaking to her, and blah, blah, blah. She said, what are you speaking about? So I told her the asteroid. If there's an asteroid coming, do you want to know? And she says, no, I don't want to know. I said, okay, then I won't tell you. But then she kept asking. She really did want to know. She said, so what do you talk about really? I said, well, you told me you didn't want to know about the asteroid. Where's the asteroid? And she said, and she asked 4 or 5 more questions, and finally I couldn't take it anymore. Finally I just said, we're all going to die. So, and she said, but not within my lifetime, right? Because that's what everybody thinks, right? Climate change is a problem, not a predicament, but a problem for the grandchildren. It's always been a problem for the grandchildren. Guess what? I'm a grandchild. I remember the environment being a big problem when I was a wee lad. And now I'm all grown up, but it's still a problem for the grandchildren. It can't be a problem for the grandchildren forever, can it? So yeah, I told her within her lifetime. I said, sometime between 18 months and 15 years from now, you and probably all of the other humans on the planet are going to be dead. She didn't seem all that enthused. Somebody else, when I spoke in California a few months ago, somebody went straight from my presentation, caught a taxi, and told the taxi driver on the way home. Right? So the taxi driver picks her up and she says, you know what I just heard? Human extinction soon! You want to know how soon? The taxi driver's like, I'm going to stop, I'm going to let you out, you don't even have to pay me. That's the very definition of I don't want to hear it. She had to get on the ride home. So some people want to talk about it. If you want to talk about it, then I would encourage you to hang around for 5 or 10 or 20 minutes after we're all done here. Because there are people who do want to talk about some of the important things in life, and they don't have very many friends, because they've lost them all, because they talk about it. So almost everywhere I speak now, there's a support group that pops up in my wake, or sometimes before I show up. And then when I was in New York recently, the support group got together for the first time in person. So we all went out to dinner. And they'd all been interacting via email for 3 or 4 months. And now they meet once a month at the home of one of these people. And I think it's pretty awesome that we have this, the biggest existential crisis in the history of our species. And almost nobody is willing to have the conversation about it. And I don't mind. Some people don't want to talk about it, that's fine. I'm going to tell them anyway whether they want to talk about it or not. But then they don't want to talk about it anymore, that's fine. I got no problem with that. Go on about your life. But some people do want to talk about it. Mike Farragon pointed out when he introduced me that he wants to talk about it. Right? So he wants people to hang around afterwards and see if there's anybody to talk about it, because this is a very lonely road. So if you actually want to talk to somebody about it, let's hang around. Can we wrap this now?
We can, and I'll just basically like to say thank you, Guy. I mean, Guy showed, he gave the evidence, and he gave the joy, and he gave the humility, and he gave the jokes, and thank you very much, Guy. It was brilliant.